Being human is fun. That's
Being human is fun indeed.
being
I
human is
like I
fun.
like I like I like humans. All right. Well, let's go ahead and begin. So, welcome everyone. Again, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the today's webinar, December 16th, 2021. We have the SME IT in 2022 survey that we want to go through. We're going to talk about the qualitative and quantitative results of that survey, focusing around security, scalability, and hybrid work. So, hi, my name is Ben Garrison. I am the technical champion slash technical evangelist here at JumpCloud. I've been at JumpCloud since March of 2022. You might have seen me on the IT Hours, which is a weekly or a fortnightly event that we do. I'm talking about general IT trends. I'll be offering the qualitative insights from what I hear around the community, around our customers as we go through our survey. I'm joined today by Josh Reynolds, who is a former Gartner analyst and former CMO of a data science company, and an overall IT trend specialist and a wizard with numbers. And he's going to be going through the quantitative insights of our survey. So Josh, go ahead and if you want to say anything or just pass it over to you.
Let's get going, Ben. Sounds good. Hello, everybody. Look, it's no secret that JumpCloud likes to periodically check in on what it's like to be an SME IT professional these days. What are the pressures? What are the priorities? What kind of progress are people making? There's a lot going on, and there's so much that changes rapidly. And it's just good to stay in touch with what you all are going through, what your peers are going through. So that's why JumpCloud commissioned Propeller Insights to survey 509 US-based SME IT professionals like we hope many of you are tuning in, and 503 UK-based SME IT professionals as well, including managers, directors, VPs, executives, anyone whose job it is to keep the lights on and keep the IT running for a small to medium-sized enterprise. Each survey respondent was from an organization with 2,500 or fewer employees, and the survey was actually conducted very recently, October 21 to 25. So that period of time gives us a view into how well are we getting used to this crazy pandemic environment? How are we adjusting to a new normal? And where are we even starting to actually create a new normal for SMEs? So as we go through these findings, as Ben mentioned, I'm going to be explaining the numbers and the story we see in the numbers. And Ben will be providing color commentary that corroborates, okay, how does that compare to what we're actually hearing and seeing from folks just like you? As you listen to these, we encourage you to find your own story in the numbers and ask yourselves as you're going through, how does your experience and situation stack up against the numbers and the insights you're seeing? How does your experience stack up against the industry average? That's useful because you can use some of these insights, kind of measure and see where you are, maybe adjust your priorities, maybe argue for more budget, more resource, just things that you can take away and learn. Because let's face it, it is so easy to feel alone and isolated in the challenges that we're facing. So hopefully what you take away from this is a little bit of insight, a little bit of inspiration, and just a sanity check. Because the short of it is, SME IT professionals are doing heroic work in really tough circumstances. So let's start there. Let's start with how it feels. We were really happy to see that fewer SME IT professionals were feeling overwhelmed. At the beginning of 21, when we did the survey first, that number was 66.3% that were feeling very or somewhat overwhelmed. And we're seeing that drop down a little bit. We're starting to acclimate, which is really good news. And not only are they, and some of you are a little bit less overwhelmed, the survey respondents told us, I'm actually a little happier in my job than I was a year ago. I mean, so it's really interesting that 40% are just as happy, or 42%, if you add up strongly agree, are even happier. And there's a really good reason for that. SME IT professionals have put in so much hard work. And as we'll see from the numbers, have made a lot of progress, are getting on top of things, are being listened to, are getting it done. And so there's this deep sense of pride and joy that's out there, even though things are tough. And I'm just curious, Ben, how does that stack up with what you're hearing from folks?
Yeah, in the community, I'm definitely, talking to people. It seems that, as the year progressed, especially in 2021, people started to get in the swing of things, right? They started to get their second win, they started to get their rhythm and their tempo, and they started to feel more confident. And as they adopted more processes and things became more business as usual, you started to see the overall stress factor just kind of decrease over time, right? But I started to feel that as they started to learn more ways to address the current challenges that they were faced with the shift over, they became more excited and they felt more accomplished, right? And they were learning things. And so I think that people just love challenges, especially I do, and overcoming them, and that's motivating. So I can see why people will be happier.
And it's also no secret. Remember, the learning center of the brain is literally next door neighbors with the pleasure center of the brain. When you actually do learn and overcome, feels good. So this happiness makes sense, and that sense of confidence that you're talking about, Ben, actually impacts the next number we see, which is that more than 3 out of 4 say I'm being listened to in my organization. I'm not just taking requests or responding to requests or taking orders. My decision makers in my organization are listening to what I recommend. We're becoming trusted advisors within SME. And that's huge because that respect empowers the IT professional to say, look, we know what the problem is. I know how to fix it. Let me go tackle it. And it empowers them to say, I know what the most important problem to solve is. Prioritization is the key to surviving any crisis. Getting the problem solved in the right order is the key to getting through a tough time. And it seems as though we're really seeing IT leaders get more authority, not just to cope with change, but when you have this kind of respect and this kind of authority within your organization, that's how you shift from coping with a new normal to actually creating one. But clearly, Ben, this is not like the end of the story and yay, it's all happily ever after. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, IT still costs money, right? Like it still costs money, and it's very common for IT departments, especially when it comes to purchasing things, to receive some type of pushback or justification, and that's never going to change because that's smart business, right? But it's nice to see that decision makers are understanding, and also not only understanding but also getting more involved in the impacts of what solid IT practices bring to the table. So it's good to see that number.
Yeah. Now, one number that we wished we had seen improve a little bit more that it had was the number of hardworking SME IT folks that it had a raised. Since the start of pandemic, how has your salary changed? Most common answer, 4 to 3%, was it's still the same. Not shocking. SMEs have had a hard time. There have been PPP loans. A lot of folks are just really trying to adjust and get through. But you see SME IT professionals working harder than ever before, taking more satisfaction in their jobs than ever before, still dealing with some degree of being overwhelmed. But the budgets for their salaries hasn't really increased that much. Most really haven't had a raise, even though they're more respected and listened to than ever before. But the good news is, while their salaries aren't increasing, the budgets they're receiving to get the job done, overall IT budgets, 3 out of 4 say, yeah, they actually are growing. And there's a slight double-edged sword here. When you get more money for IT, you also get more expectation. It's awesome that you won your budget argument and you get more to work with. And then sometimes the company just expects you to work miracles. So it's really important to prioritize, okay, I've got the more money. Where am I going to spend it? How will I put it to use to make sure that not only can I drive good results, that I can drive results in a way that works for me, that's manageable, that's sustainable, that's easy. Because what I can't do is just invest in 20 tools and then have to invest all the time it takes to manage and use those 20 tools. But the bottom line is, it looks like for the most part, IT and SME has got the budget that they need to get it done. And it looks like that trend is going to continue into next year, because we asked, do you expect your IT budget to grow? And it was pretty good to see less than 4% say it's going to go down a little bit. For the most part, it's going to go up, which does indicate a light at the end of the tunnel. And this corroborates the data on they're being listened to, they're being recommended. And clearly SME IT is recommending, hey, the world has changed so much, we got to change to, there's some new great tools out there to use. And a combination of that budget authority plus that internal respect, it's leading to increased budgets. And Ben, just curious to get your take based on what you're hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I start to see, the conversation around necessarily cost, right? Cost of things have been, as the year started progressing, you started to see that the cost was still something that was being thought of, but people were more focused on solving the problems of their organization. And so just kind of reinforces, hey, as business leaders start to get more and more in tune to what is needed when it comes to their IT strategy, they will make some better decisions or some different decisions as it comes to maximizing their budget for that.
Got it. I also just want to call out, you can use this data if you're one of those 1 in 5 that isn't getting an increased budget. You can actually use this information to say, hey, look, on the whole, SMEs are getting a little bit more budget, we're behind the curve, or you can use it to justify the budget increases that you've had. Now, we are going to get to the security and scalability information soon, but we just want to finish grounding ourselves in the baseline. What does it feel like? And for the most part, we want to emphasize most of the people we listened to felt like their budget was adequate to meet the need. I've got what I need to work with, but that doesn't mean that running IT for an SME is easy. As we're going to see, the admin challenges are huge. And when we asked about, well, how is that money being spent? What we heard loud and clear was, a lot of them were saying, I feel like we're spending the right amount on security to enable remote work, but about 1 in 3 were like, I think we're overspending on that. I think we could be more efficient with that. So there's an opportunity to streamline, but clearly there's an equal split here. People that disagree or are neutral and agree that spending the money the right way and balancing the security of remote work and the ease of remote work, that's going to be a trend that we see. But still, like, it's good to see that we're tackling the right issue here, because remote work is going to be such a high priority in 22. It's the big thing to wrestle with, and that's what we're going to look at pretty soon. Ben, any other comments on this before we take the next chapter?
No, it's very interesting just to see that in the raw data, because talking to people, 2021, people were throwing things, when I say just throwing it to the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Oh, I have this problem, let's fill that with this. I have this problem, let's fill that with that. And they did overspend on solutions because they had their legacy stuff and they needed new things. So and not one solution necessarily solved it all, when they were first reacting to this. So but as you start to look for more efficient ways going into 2022, you're going to start to see organizations and people, from what I hear, looking to trim the fat, quote unquote. And that might be interesting to see. And they might even start to look at getting some external help, maybe supplementing some of their gaps there in IT. So,
well, that's a nice segue to the next section, which we'll get into, which is how are folks working with managed service providers. Before we go any further, we just want to remind you, please continue to post questions as we go in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that. We will have a Q&A section at the end as well, in case something didn't get addressed, but keep the questions coming as we go. And we promise we're going to be sharing very soon the data that's specific to security, specific to remote work. And one of those dynamics is, as you were saying, Ben, when do I get outside help? When do I get someone outside my organization to help out? And it was because MSPs play such a big role in that, we actually asked a series of questions specifically about the roles that MSP plays, and when you would use them, when you would not use them, why you would use them, why you would not use them. The first thing we found was that actually it's a pretty important question to ask. Almost 2 out of 3 of the SMEs we surveyed in the US and the UK said, yeah, you know what, I actually do use an MSP to some degree, whether they are completely managing the program, which was 1 in 4, or there's some support, which was 38%. And even the ones that weren't using them, about 1 in 4 said, yeah, we're thinking about it. We don't work with one, but we think there may be some benefits there. Only 13.5% said not working with, not really thinking about it. So the vast majority see value in the MSP or are already working with an MSP. But there's pros and cons to it and things you got to watch out for. More than half clearly see that MSPs are worth the money. And here you see the chart that shows you why they're popular. Number one reason was they're up to date on the latest tech. I've got so much to keep track of as an SME IT admin. What I can't afford to do is to have a clear view of what's cutting edge, where I'm kind of catching up. I'm going to trust someone else to manage that innovation risk and stay up to speed with the latest curve. You also see 6 out of 10 saying they can provide a better user experience. And once again, you see that theme emerge. I've got to take care of my employees, and I've got to make sure that they're as productive as they can with as little headache as they can. Cost effective, oddly enough, wasn't the number one reason. Being up to speed on innovation, delivering a better user experience was even more important than the money. So it's not just seen as a money-saving device. So they can be cost effective. That wasn't the top driver. And then right behind that was they're going to be able to secure our end users and their identity better than we can. Oddly enough, customer support got the lowest marks. And that may be because many MSPs themselves have gone through a lot of change in the pandemic. I think a lot of them would even say, they had to adjust how they work. And customer support hasn't always been the strength, but oddly enough, it's not the main reason that we go. Just give people a chance to pause, take in the numbers, and let me show you where the concern is. We asked, how much do you agree or disagree with the statement that you've got concerns about how MSPs manage security? And it's kind of a mixed bag. If you add up strongly agree and strongly disagree, so strongly agree and agree on the one hand, and strongly disagree and disagree on the other side, you see that 37% have some degree of concern around security, and the other don't. Like, it's a pretty equal match. And then the remaining 24% are fairly neutral about it. So what you see here is security is really important. Employee experience is really important. Not 100% sure how the MSPs are going to manage that balance, but I know they can probably protect my security better than I can, and I trust them to be up to speed. When we dug into the reasons of the people that weren't going with MSPs, the main reason that the SME IT professional will choose not to work with an SME just comes down to a sense of control. They said, I prefer to handle IT myself. It's because there's so much uncertainty, or because they feel that things are so weird and fast moving in their organization. The minority of people that hang on to control and don't work with an MSP, that group wants control. And about 56% said, look, number one reason I don't work with an MSP is because I want that sense of control. So having a sense of ownership and agency and being able to secure the organization and help people work more efficiently, it comes down to, do you think you can do that? Is it easy enough for you to do that? Are you going to rely on somebody else to do that? That seems to be the big question. And I see this level of question: what kind of differences in security are you seeing in a startup versus a larger or more established company? What I can tell you is, for the, and Ben, I'll turn to you here in a second and see if you got a point of view, but for the startup, the question of security management is one of the biggest issues. When I was at Gartner, I actually covered cybersecurity and collaborative computing, and it's been true for a long time that even though the larger organizations have more to manage, they have bigger structures around security management, security governance. Whereas for the smaller organizations, you've got less process in place a lot of the time. You've got less governance in place a lot of the time. And it's just a less organized affair around security. It tends to be a little bit more reactive, which is another reason you might want just someone else to handle it, because they provide that structure. Ben, is there any other thing that you want to comment on the differences in security concerns between the smaller versus some of the larger companies?
I think the biggest thing as it comes to startup versus larger companies is that, you have your lines of demarcation, right? And those are going to be blurred in a startup. My hat can be multiple things. And
Yeah.
when you have one person wearing multiple hats, that can start to open up some opportunities for risk that might not be there in a larger organization that has the cost and the overhead to be able to pay for a security and a risk compliance person, or, a DevOps people or whatever to lock down certain areas. And so going to, like, say, an MSP for those startup organizations, they get kind of like that out of box, all the things that those larger companies need to be able to address those things. So that's what I hear primarily when people go to MSPs, is because they want to
Yeah.
cover multiple things.
Well, and actually that delineation, Ben, is borne out in the final question we asked around MSPs was, okay, so what is the size of SME that uses it? And here you see that we saw pretty equal representation across every variant size of SME that we asked about. I mean, they're the smallest SME engagement was with the smallest organization. But once you hit that 50 to 100 mark, you see the numbers double and jump up. And it just shows you that when my challenge is managing a bunch of employees that I can't necessarily see every day, where I've got a little bit less control, then having outside help becomes even more important. Ben, was there anything about these numbers that surprised you?
I mean, it just what I just said, right? This almost kind of contradicts that just a little bit, right? Because I'm surprised, but that sweet spot of being, that 200 to 500, but then you also see almost 19% the people who responded believe that if you're over 1,000, that's when an MSP makes sense, right? So I think the thought of, hey, the more employees that you get, right, does it make sense to start to supplement elements of your IT organization with an MSP, or should you go to that old model of, hey, the
Yeah.
fewer numbers of employees are better? So it's overall that, you're right. Once you hit that 50, that employee mark 50, that just seems to be a good little cornerstone that makes the most sense to bring in some help from an MSP. Otherwise, you're trying to ramp up an entire IT department from a ground zero. So
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. The last thing that comes to mind, just based on the previous question of what's the difference in how you approach security, startup versus a more established company, the motivation. If I'm a startup, I've got to protect growth. I've got to protect growth because I've promised some very wealthy people that they're going to get their money back and that we're going to grow and give a good return. Or if I'm a family-owned business, I want to grow and protect my legacy, but it's the growth I'm protecting. And so I want to secure anything that might inhibit my growth. If I'm a larger, more established company, one of the main motivators is I don't want to lose something. I've got more to lose. I'm protecting data, I'm protecting assets. But in either case, I've got a good reason to engage in security. And as you're saying, Ben, with a larger organization, I've got more safeguards in place. I've got cybersecurity specialists. I have a team, a process, governance, as opposed to the people that are wearing multiple hats and just getting everything done at the same time. But the bottom line is that people are using MSPs because it's a headache to balance both security and the employee experience. The more employees you have, the bigger that headache is. And the bigger that headache is, the more likely you are to want some help. I'll pause for any more questions. We've got plenty of time for discussion. If not, we're getting now into the meat of what is it about the employee experience we're trying to protect, and where is that among the priorities for SME ITs right now? Taking a look at the
So
chat.
not really a question there, Josh, but just something from the audience, and just more of a comment to add to that a little bit. With this comes from one of our audience members that with MSPs being available globally in regions where dev cost is lower, a lot more SMEs have access and ability to use MSPs
Yeah,
as long as there is a trusted track record of the MSP wherever it may be globally. So cost benefits with managed risks with a dedicated MSP can help with any size SME from anywhere. So that's a really good point. Thank you for that.
that's cool. And that's also the beauty of the change we've all been through. I mean, it's been rough the last 2 years, but we've really learned that location is no longer a barrier. You can get MSPs from support anywhere in the world, and that's awesome. So let's talk about the employee experience. It is tough to balance security and employee experience. And what we've seen is over the last 2 years, employee experience is really growing to be one of the most important things. You see a lot of companies talking more and more about employee experience, whereas 5 years ago it was all about the customer experience. But over time, being able to hire and retain and nurture the right talent became more of an issue even before the pandemic. And now in October, we see that an overwhelming percentage feel like the impact on employee experience should be a major factor in which IT solutions they go with. Is this going to make the lives of our employees easier or harder? And time was A while ago, you'd see, no, I need to secure my organization at all costs. I don't care if it means I've got to log in on a certain device or use biometrics or two-factor authentication or whatever it takes. I'm going to train people in anti-phishing techniques, whatever it takes. And now it's like, no, there really is a balance because I've got to be humane about this and respect the experience. So we see overwhelmingly employee experience is impacting the way people purchase technology. And it's a major priority heading into 2022 because of the state of the work from anywhere environment. We asked specifically the SMEs in the US and the UK, so give us the breakdown. What's your situation? How many folks are full-time? How many folks are hybrid, remotely working or full-time? And 4 out of 10, we're saying, okay, they're office full-time. And even in that situation, I've got a lot of complexity to manage. But 1 in 3 said they are remote full-time. They're not coming into the office at all. And about an equal amount was saying, no, it's a mix. It's a mix. So more often than not, there's some degree of remote work going on. And that makes it that much harder for an SME IT admin to create a safe and smooth experience from anywhere. And Ben, it feels like this is only going to get even more important when you think about how many companies are trying to find the right talent, hang on to the right talent, and how important it is to attract and retain employees over time.
Hmm. Yeah, I have this conversation pretty much daily with IT people, and they're constantly looking for ways to enable their end users, what I like to call coworkers, right? Enable them to make IT magic happen, right? Creating that total employee experience is extremely underestimated, and I think it's something that organizations are going to continue to keep looking for ways to make their workforce more productive and efficient, and IT has a huge, huge role in that. Decentralized environments shouldn't be more difficult to work in. It should be easier for them to work in. But you're starting to see that more and more as people understand that and start talking about it more. So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. If you look then at what is the state of that remote or hybrid work experience, you see that most of the folks we talked to said, it could be better. Um, it's pretty clear that we're still going through a learning curve. More than half either agreed or strongly agreed that the remote hybrid experience, it's not as easy or convenient as it could be. And this might be a big part of why, going back to the very beginning, a lot of the folks we talked to said they still feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of work to do on this front, a lot of unpredictability. And for those SMEs, many don't have the standard set of practices that a larger company would to help them with governance and onboarding and everything else. It's a problem that only gets even more exacerbated when you look at the technologically complex and less homogeneous IT environments that we're working with. We were just curious, okay, so what's the device type breakdown? How much of what's going on is you've got to work with some combination of Windows and Linux and Mac OS and incompatible systems or systems that are really hard to integrate and work with. You can see that SMEs that we talked to, overwhelmingly, it's a Windows world. But you still have 1 in 5 working with Mac OS and a slightly smaller number working with Linux. The point being that when you are in a homogeneous environment, if that's your situation, if you find yourself with some folks on Mac, some folks on PC, then it's just that much harder to put together the systems that let you manage all that. Ben, just curious, like what you're seeing around this trend.
yeah, it's funny because I get asked questions all the time. Well, what about Linux and what about Mac, right? And these are things that you always hear questions about. Hey, I have 20% this or 30% that, and so I'm actually interested and fascinated by the numbers because I get a lot of questions about Linux and Mac, especially towards the end of this year. And non-homogeneous environments are very common these days, and it's something that people need to understand in order to get that offer that really good experience. And we have from the chat here, we have someone saying that they're 60% Mac, 20% Windows, and 20% Linux. So Josh, go ahead and add that to your survey there. We might want to change that real time dynamically, please. But we also have a question coming up as well, is that do things like MDM help or hurt the remote experience? We're starting to roll out tools like this to our workforce, but getting remote people to do things to make their lives easier is hard for some reason. Josh, I'll let you go ahead and take a stab at it first, and then I can chime in there if you want.
Sure, I can speak to the behavioral change issue. Yeah, no, I just saw the comment there too. So the uh, things like MDM, anything where you're asking your people to do something that would make their lives easier, there's an initial behavioral change. There's all kinds of things I could do to make my life easier. I could switch to decaf. I could actually exercise a bit more in the morning. Things that if I started to do them, the rest of my day would go that much better. And it's no different than trying to help a remote employee just do one or two things and the rest of your experience will be well. It's the behavioral change. It's that hump. And so in the communication around that change, there's two tips I can give you. Tell them not only the reason for changing, but tell them the cost of not changing, and tell them what's not going to change. So here's the one thing I'm looking for you to do differently, but here's everything else that will stay the same. Reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed. Getting folks to make a behavioral adjustment is really hard, but if you can communicate not only why they should, but here's how your life is being made difficult because you're not changing. The cost of not changing motivates a busy person more than the benefit of changing. And then illustrate, and by the way, that's the only, like, we're not going to ask for anything else. Here's what's not going to change. What I could also say is that when it comes to things like MDM, I would say uh, it's so beneficial to the IT admin as well. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, here's how you could help me help you. We're going to see in the numbers shortly that IT admins tend to prioritize making their employees' lives easier, but they need their own lives to be a little bit easier too. And so, Ben, I would just close this out and hand it to you by saying, don't be afraid to say, I need this, not just you need this. Anything else you want to add, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, change is scary, right? Let's just put it out there. Change is scary, and sometimes when we change things, people are going to, well, how's it going to impact my day, my day-to-day operations? But again, to Josh's point, I've seen a lot of really cool success stories around communicating with your coworkers about what the change is, how it's going to benefit not only them but the entire organization, and then yeah, being transparent, just say, hey, this is going to help us become compliant as an organization as we move through, needing to do certain things and for our growth. And I think most part your coworkers are going to embrace that and want to help. So.
Got it. And I know there are more questions around end user experience. We're going to get through the next few data points, and then we'll come back and revisit even more questions at the end of this particular section. But we did ask, look, what's the biggest challenge for your IT team? Like, remote work is far and away one of the biggest challenges that have come out since the whole pandemic started. Ongoing management of remote workers, migrating workers to full or partially remote, and device management, and the cost of solutions required to make remote work. These are all really, really high factors. Look at that other column of 1.9%. We put that in there to make sure we're not overlooking other stuff. We're not. Like 2% said it was something else. That's 1 in 50. Everyone is focused on making sure that remote or hybrid work environment is going to work. And again, look at that increased work burden. That is, it's harder to do this. There's something just inherently heroic in the numbers we've seen over and over again. SME IT admins continue to put everybody else first. They're happier in their jobs, even though they're getting paid no more, but they're getting it done and they're getting results, and that gives them the satisfaction. And at every turn, when we see the numbers, so what are you worried about? I'm worried about serving my employees. Oh, and by the way, my job is hard. And part of that comes down to, Ben, I think people don't always know that it could be easier. We just get used to being tenacious and knocking it down and getting it done, that sometimes we forget, it doesn't always have to be that hard. And that's why I love the question about MDM. Is that going to make things, why is it so hard to get folks to help us? Don't be afraid to ask for it. And I see more context with another question here in the chat, Ben. Is that one that you want to take, or should I take first?
I can look at that. So it's like, what about the end user experience? What level can we expect from them? Supporting levels, I believe end users and nowadays they should have at least a basic concept in IT. And
Yeah.
without getting into the weeds with that too much, I would actually kind of challenge that thinking a little bit. I know, I'm not supposed to do that, but I would kind of challenge that thinking a little bit and say, I know how to drive my car. I know how to put gas in it, and I know I need to go and get my oil changed. That doesn't make me a mechanic, right? It doesn't make me an auto professional. And so there's a reason why I'm good at what I do because I have a passion around that. And so I would challenge that thinking that people who are working, they have a passionate or they have a certain thing that they're really, really good at. Computers are probably not, or even IT is not something they're interested in. So I would challenge that a little bit and just think to myself, you know what, they're going to give the level that they're most comfortable with, and that's probably all that you can expect. So
I'll follow on that and say, if you look at how IT has been sold, how technology experience has been sold for almost a decade now, we've heard about everything as a service, right? You log onto a website and everything and everyone else's part of their lives is designed to make it as easy and intuitive as possible. Whether you're booking air travel or a hotel, reserving a table, in every other part of our lives, companies are employing designers and experienced designers to make it seamless and intuitive and easy. And we carry that expectation with us, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly. I carry that expectation with me to my work. And if I'm already feeling overwhelmed, and most of us are, and we're under the gun, then again, whether it's fair or unfair, reasonable or unreasonable, the emotional experiences, I just expect my IT to work. To use your analogy, Ben, I'm going to put, I'm going to get in the car, hit the start button, it should go. That's not to say it's not fair to ask for more help. So the answer to the question, I think, what can we expect from them? My guidance is have that discussion with the leadership of your company. Tell them what one or two things you're going to ask your employees to do to make your life easier. Just one or two things. So how much can we expect? It's a hard thing to answer. I think Ben's answer is right, not a lot, but that doesn't mean you can't change the expectation if you really need it. So again, ask your senior leadership, hey, if we can just get everyone to do one or two things differently, that would have the biggest impact. There's really no harm in asking. That would be my approach. One more bit of data to look at when it comes to empowering remote work. This is a bit of an eye chart, and it's perhaps a good reminder that you can in fact download this study for yourself at JumpCloud and take an even closer look at the numbers. But when you look at the biggest IT priorities for managing security in 2021, what they've been, and in 2022, what they're going to be, layered security was a top priority this year and will still be for next year. In fact, our top three priorities, people have kept it the same from 21 to 22 because we don't feel like we've really finished our work around layered security or making remote work easier for end users. And then here it is again. Third priority is making my job easier. Once again, IT admins making other people the priority. And that's why I keep coming back with the counsel, ask for what you need. It's good and admirable that everyone puts everyone else first, but make sure you ask for what you need at the same time. We did see a slight adjustment in priority, easier management of devices. That's even more of a priority for 2022. That's increasing. And implementing SSO or unified identity management, that's bumping up on the list a little bit. But device management, it's dropped down a little bit. But overall, we see layered security and empowering remote work and making my own job a little easier consistently the top three challenges for last year and heading into that year. And Ben, I'm just curious, how does that compare with the conversations you're having with this community?
yeah, I think, overall the whole concept of like work from anywhere as being kind of like that nice to have in the past, right? It's not really ever a requirement. You're starting to see that become a requirement in their continuity plans moving forward, and people are always asking, what are the best practices in getting that layered security, but also from a hybrid environment, whether it be on-prem or whether it be from a cloud-based perspective or just all cloud, right? So more
Yes.
organizations are building more foundational requirements when considering these types of solutions. Um, Real quick here, we'll get the link to the report out as well. So the link to the report will be available soon, I'm sure. And so yeah, we'll move on to the next.
Sounds good. Our next part of the discussion is this conflict, this tension between keeping the SME secure and keeping the SME employees productive and giving them that seamless experience, making them productive and protected. And look, that's been the challenge forever. Deloitte has this really wonderful, simple way of thinking about innovation. They say innovation is something that eliminates a trade-off. In retail, I had to compromise around location. Mobile technology comes around, and location is no longer a compromise. Or in physical mechanics, that super strong, lightweight material, that galvanized plastic with threads of titanium that's in your iPhone case, like that innovation, that resolves the trade-off between being lightweight and being durable. And what we're seeing in the SME world right now is we're resolving that trade-off, that tension between being secure and being easy, because those two things don't often go together. And that's really the massive focus for 2022. So as an SME IT admin, if you want to focus on one of the top priorities, it's finding that balance and solving for that. Now, again, we asked, what about security are you most worried about? And not surprising, we saw spear phishing, ransomware, and unsecured networks ranked pretty highly as the top three. And the horror stories speak for themselves: SolarWinds, Colonial Pipeline hack, and the other things we read about. That's going to keep folks up at night. And you can see there are a lot of other security issues that are going on here, but going after people, targeting people very carefully, that is far and away like the top concern. And then ransomware and having unsecured networks, it's just a big worry for people, especially for an SME that's high growth, adding a lot of new people. Human beings are still the #1 most vulnerable target. This computer up here, the human brain, that is the least protected of all computers because it's got not the same security protections. It's just easy to trick people. But these are the concerns that colleagues in the SME IT world have. And doing that while everyone is in unpredictable places, on unpredictable networks sometimes, that makes it even more of a priority. Overwhelmingly, we saw that people agreed or strongly agreed that remote hybrid work makes security even more important. So if you are one of those minority SME IT organizations that hasn't increased your focus on security, this is telling you it is now by far and away the industry norm. The fundamental challenge is how to make this easier for SME IT admins to manage. They know it's the job, but the question is, how do we make this easier to do? And how do you get people on your own company, to the previous question, how do you get them to stop making it harder? Even if they're not going to do something to make it easier, ask them to stop doing the things that make it harder. We also saw that the remote work makes it harder for the employees to do the right thing. And that's because they're not as part of this, one consistent system with one consistent processes. It's easier to sort of just drift off and do your own thing when you're working so remotely. So again, overwhelmingly, you see agree or strongly agree that this is an issue when we're having this hybrid work from anywhere environment, and additional security measures is really the focus here, without making things harder for the user or the admin. And again, there's no surprise on this one. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. And for the last 2 years, we have had one big mean mother leading to all kinds of quick innovations. And now we're sorting out, how do we make that secure and how do we make it easy? One more look here is that adding security just makes it harder. So not only does remote work make security more important, adding security makes an easy user experience difficult. This is the contradiction. I mean, this is the juggling act. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that's fighting back, to quote Q from one of my favorite Bond movies. So this is a huge issue. And Ben, anything you want to add to this conundrum of making the user experience easier and how to make it more secure at the same time?
I mean, ease of use and security seems like an oxymoron to me personally, right? But you start to get a lot of questions from people. Well, how can I do that? How can I start to bring parity to that, and they start asking questions around zero trust and conditional access within that identity and access management framework. Those are things that start to make things a little bit easier. And as IT admins start to learn more about this and feel more comfortable with it, you can start to see this being a little bit more applied next year. So.
And it's especially going to come into play when you look at the rise of zero trust. That's what's behind a lot of the zero trust, is that zero trust is going to help me resolve that tension between ease of use and security. So it's less of an oxymoron. And so you look at this, more than half of the folks we surveyed in October said that they plan to or are pursuing a zero trust approach to security right now. Maybe 1 in 5 said no, but the other 1 in 5 said not sure, but are still open to it. There is a real push toward adopting zero trust for that reason. And Ben, if I'm not mistaken, it's a topic that JumpCloud's going to talk about more next month.
Yeah, so keep an eye out on our webpage for a Zero Trust webinar invite sometime in January. It's going to talk through how to approach it, how to shift from planning to a pragmatic action items. It's a critical tool, not just a buzzword. So be on the lookout for that, especially if you're in that I don't know or no category. I would definitely go take a look at that webinar sometime in January.
Yeah, and the chart's not on the screen here, but just to share one other insight on security, we saw that about 45, 46% of the folks we talked to had already integrated some multi-factor authentication, some MFA across all their application, and 43% had integrated MFA across at least some of their applications. The point being, there's a lot of activity in the SME sector for how do I make this easier and more secure at the same time, and zero trust is just, it's going to play a huge role. And if you're one of the folks that either haven't considered it yet or haven't adopted it yet, and you want to explore that more, the webinar next month is going to help you with that. But here you see the numbers around multi-factor authentication, and the fact that it's so required across everything, or at least across some, and it's very low percentage that said we don't plan to implement. So it's pretty standard. Most folks are using it, and it's because of the need to balance that complexity and that security. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is making this easy for the IT admin. Want to emphasize again, SME IT admins have this heroic strain to them. That's what the numbers are telling us. They put others first. They're happy even when they're not getting raises. They're feeling a little less overwhelmed, but some still are a little overwhelmed, but they're getting it done. They're getting it done no matter what the circumstances. And the first thing we see is that 70% feel like they're meeting the onboarding needs. So I'm going to help, IT is going to help make it easier to bring in new talent as the SME sector continues to grow and rebound. And that's huge. Only 5.8% disagreed, or 1.1 strongly disagreed, that they weren't helping with the onboarding. That means that they're helping to empower growth. That's IT not as a cost center, that's IT as a strategic business asset. And even more, an even higher percentage believe that they are meeting or exceeding expectations when it comes to supporting a hybrid work environment. So really important finding. We've been talking all along about how hard it is to do, and the folks we talk to say, and I'm getting it done. I'm getting it done. It's just really, really hard to do. Ben, how does this compare with the folks that you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the sentiment that I get from people when I talk to them at different conferences and throughout the community. You find a way. IT professionals, we just find a way to get things done, and also doing it well and doing it effectively is great for professional and personal growth, and it reduces some stress. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you do is a very appropriate sentiment. But to the point that's been raised a few times in the chat and on questions, man, employees don't always make it easy. And one of the things that also makes it hard to work with is how many different accounts employees have to manage across their work resources. This is complicating things. And so we see 1 to 2 at 32.5% range, 2 to 3 at 40%, 3 to 4 at 15%. The point is that 2/3 have to wrestle multiple accounts. And for an SME, that's that's weird. Like a lot of folks are doing it, but that's harder. That just adds to the complexity. And only about 1 in 3 are fully in control of those accounts and permissions. So not only do I have multiple accounts to manage, there's a lot I can't and don't control. That's a really big deal. So when you look at those two things stacked up, and the fact that roughly, some combination, about 23% admitted that to some degree the employees' accounts are unmanaged. Wow, like this is just a monumental task. And the fact that SME IT folks are getting it done is remarkable. And Ben, I'm just curious, like it seems to me that the message here is really 2022 needs to be about making the IT admin's job easier. What did you see in this?
Yeah, I think, and this is more so my observation and also maybe just general conversations that I've heard, but this is an interesting slide from me because it made me think a little bit more about what could be causing this. And so again, if you're in the audience, if you had some opinions on that, feel free to throw them in the chat there. But it could be an education opportunity. How do I do this, right? How do I go from an on-prem, my 4 walls of safety, into something where I have to secure remote and cloud-based resources? And we're also going to see that next year, this is probably going to get addressed more and more. And the main reason why I feel confident about that is because you're going to start to see vendors and products really starting to get to that, I know, buzzword, feature parity, with integrations around what the IT and organization environment needs and what it can provide as a solution. So yeah, and networking, by the way, just networking is always fun. So we're just going to put it out there.
Gotcha. 2 more insights on making the IT admin's job a little bit easier. Right now, we asked how many tools is your organization using to manage these identities, these access, these devices, and it was really interesting to see how many are using so many. That 10.6% that's using more than 4. Good Lord, like that's a lot. I mean, it would be so much easier if there were a streamlined, simplified way to manage all this complexity. When the tools we have, more tools doesn't mean more efficiency. More tools means more tools. And we forget the cost of managing an individual tool on its own. So you've got multiple accounts, some of which you don't have complete control over, and you've got multiple tools to manage it. It's no wonder that things can feel a little bit overwhelming. Ben, anything to add at this point?
Not much. I mean, more than just, hey, I've been in a lot of conversations, whether it be online or in person, around, they're trying to combine or trying to find solutions that do multiple things. Point solutions are not less expensive, right? And not only are they more expensive, they're difficult to manage. And having documentation for multiple vendors, one, there's a cost of documentation, right? But then, onboarding vendors, right? Onboarding and offboarding vendors, more so onboarding is a challenge, right? Vendor risk assessments and getting legal and finance and all that stuff, that takes a lot of time. But back to what I was saying before about feature parity with our vendors, you're going to start to see more solutions working to solve all of these IT problems, and you're going to start to see things coming more in line with that single pane of glass or that frictionless environment where maybe you don't need 4 or 5 different vendors when you can do maybe with 1 or 2.
Yeah, yeah. And the last data point to share for today is just that desire that you're talking about, Ben. Like the preference is I would rather use a single tool. We're not using multiple tools because we want to. Maybe we were just moving fast, and we needed a solution right away. That's a lot of that been going on for the last 2 years, where we saw this rapid acceleration of innovation and adopting new tools and adopting new processes because, let's face it, our planet went through a wormhole and we're now in one of the other multiverses. This is crazy, all the stuff we had to change in such a relatively short period of time. Didn't give us a lot of time to think through the consequences of a lot of the different choices we made, including how many tools we're using. We're just throwing stuff against the wall, as I've heard you mention, Ben. Like we're just throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what's going to work. Now is the time to take a breath, assess, and optimize. Now is the time for the SME IT admin to have that rare moment to think about what works for you and to prioritize yourself in 2022. What is it you can do to make your job easier? So you've got this moment of choice coming into next year. What are you going to ask for that you haven't asked for? What can you as an SME IT professional do to make your own life easier, so it's even more possible for you to make the lives of your employees easier. And just a few closing thoughts, and then we'll see if there's any closing Q&A. First of all, we want to remind people that we are definitely going to send the report and the toolkit via chat, and it'll be shared with you afterwards as well. But look, the pandemic has just changed so many things. There's so much complexity out there. We have the ability to make things easier for ourselves and the folks that we're working with. And it really is about not just adjusting to the new normal. That's what 2021 was about. 2022 is deciding what kind of normal we want to create. Ben, any other final words from you before we share additional resources?
My last final thoughts, and that's more of a human thing, not the numbers or anything along those lines, but I feel that a lot of us in 2021 did a lot of reacting. And reacting is great when you need to, but I think that we need to start looking to 2022 as an opportunity to start responding. So what I would say for a lot of the IT admins out there is, I put a challenge out there for you. Take some time to focus on yourself. Learn something new in the world of IT. Get a new certification. I'm getting one myself. Learn a new skill. Take control. Write your own story. Start to get back into a normal of learning something and growing, because if you're just stuck in this reactionary phase, it's not very rewarding. So that's my only last closing thoughts when it comes to that.
No, thank you. And we've taken the time to put together the questions that we've heard SME IT admins ask themselves, as you say, Ben, to determine to write that own story. They're asking themselves how they strike the balance between easy and secure. They're asking, how do I manage this increasingly complex environment? And how can I streamline the process to make my job easier too? These are the questions that increasingly SME IT admins like yourselves are asking themselves. And JumpCloud is definitely here to help. There are additional resources that you can check in. You've seen the toolkit. There's the JumpCloud Lounge if you want to log in and actually get some additional help. Of course, you've got Ben in the IT Hour, and there's links to that as well. Upcoming webinars to help you tackle that next challenge and compare notes with how your approach and your solutions are comparing to others. And of course, you can always give JumpCloud a try as well. And so these links are in the report as well, just to be useful to you. Mostly, we just want to say thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for your attention today. And we'll just take a moment to see if there are any closing questions before we wrap it up.
I don't really see any questions, but there was a couple of comments. People, hey, thank you for making things clear. I know it was a bit tricky as your question pertains to around the level of support. So thank you for that. One call out, the teams have to comply with GDPR and HIPAA, and individual European country privacy and security regs. Staying compliant is a challenge. It really is. I think that would definitely help you out with an MSP in that regard to help navigate those waters, or just a professional that knows about those compliance and regulatory things. Yep. A resounding thank you from one of our participants, so thank you very much. Another person mentioned that Zoom took advantage of the trip through the wormhole. The idea now should be, yes, fewer tools that are multi-feature and mature, and not just what sticks. That is a great call out. We don't want anything to just stick anymore. We actually want them to solve and be a foundation to our wall, not just sticking to the wall. So, but there wasn't any other questions. So I guess that would probably bring us right at time. That was almost perfect.
Almost like it was meant to be, Ben. It's great to present with you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks everyone again, and enjoy your holiday and enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.